He shuffled in, wrists cuffed before him like a quiet apology. Raymond Knox, thin, hunched, draped in a second-hand coat, moved with the caution of someone long ignored. The courtroom lights cast no warmth, only a sterile hum above worn tile and hollow benches. No one looked at him. No one asked. The bailiff spoke his name once, flat and routine. Raymond Knox. He barely lifted his eyes. "Gunnery Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps," he said. Low. Almost reverent. A pause. Judge Olivia Parker blinked, pen midair. The name. Her fingers tightened around the file. Knox. Outside Fallujah. A burning LAV. Her brother's voice on a satellite call, "He dragged me out. Flames everywhere." Name was Knox. She remembered because he never cried. That day, he cried. She stared at the man now seated at the defense table, gaunt and tired. He seemed impossibly smaller than memory allowed. But the name was there, stamped across yellowed service files, Raymond E. Knox, USMC. She closed the folder. Gently. Outside the courthouse, wind scraped through barren branches. Inside, the prosecutor stood, glasses too new, suit too clean. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with loitering and public nuisance." Officers found him sleeping against the municipal annex. He became verbally aggressive. Knox said nothing. The coat slumped around him like old skin. He hadn't been aggressive. Only cold. "And your recommendation?" Parker asked, her voice steady. "Probation. 45 days. Ban from the downtown district." "Ban?" she asked. "Standard for repeat non-residents, ma'am." "He's transient." Transient. The word struck like a gavel. Not a man. Not a Marine. Not the one who'd pulled her brother from fire. She glanced back down. The black and white mugshot stared blankly at her, eyes sunken, shoulders collapsed. The weight of forgotten years. Olivia Parker stood. Recess. 10 minutes. She didn't wait for objection. She stepped down, heels clicking softly on courthouse tile. Toward the hallway. Toward confirmation. Toward a man once wrapped in fire, who hadn't let go. The hallway was colder than she remembered. Judge Olivia Parker moved briskly, heels biting against linoleum, breath just short of steady. She reached the clerk's office and leaned in. "Archives," she said. "I need a full-service record. Raymond E. Knox. Gunnery Sergeant. U.S. Marine Corps." The clerk hesitated. "Ma'am." "Expedite it." She left before the answer. She already knew. Back in chambers, she sat slowly. Hands clasped. The file lay open. His mugshot had been hastily paper-clipped to a list of infractions: trespassing, loitering, one citation for disturbing the peace outside a bakery. He'd asked for bread. No priors before that. No address listed. Just a string of cold places, shelter logs, transient reports. She turned to the back page, service timeline. Vietnam. Desert Storm. Iraq. Bronze Star. Purple Heart. 2 Navy commendations. Discharged 2008. Injury, spinal trauma. VA status, delayed. Claim, unresolved. Appeals, unanswered. There was a final note, nearly illegible. Last confirmed address, Hope House Shelter, December 2022. No contact since. Parker closed the file and breathed out. She remembered that night. Her brother, Jacob, calling from the field. Crackling signal. Static everywhere. "His name's Knox," he'd said, voice raw. He came out of the smoke. Grabbed me. Wouldn't leave me. He was limping. I thought he'd fall. He didn't. Got me out. Then went back in for the driver. The line cut out after that. It was weeks before she heard from him again. She never forgot the name. Outside. Raymond Knox sat alone on the bench. His hands were folded in his lap now, wrists still cuffed. He didn't fidget. Didn't blink much. He had the stillness of men who'd learned not to ask for anything. A public defender leaned in, murmuring something about pleading down. Knox nodded once but didn't respond. He'd already lost so much, there was nothing left to negotiate. He remembered the bakery. Warm air bleeding from a side vent. The way it reminded him of forward operating bases, when you'd find a place with hot exhaust and press your hands near the pipe. Just enough to feel your fingers again. That was all he'd wanted. Warmth. The young officer that night hadn't looked twice. Just saw an old man huddled near a building. Told him to move. He did. Moved 10 feet and sat again. The second time, they called for backup. Aggressive behavior, they'd said. He hadn't raised his voice. Just said he was tired. He didn't tell them he hadn't slept inside in 9 days. Inside the courtroom. When Olivia Parker returned to the bench, her posture was different. Straighter, but heavier. As if memory had settled onto her shoulders. The prosecutor stood, ready to continue. She raised a hand. "One moment," she said. She turned to the bailiff. "Is there a military officer present?" The man glanced around. "Ma'am, I believe a Major West was seated in the gallery." "Bring him forward." A pause. The courtroom shifted. Murmurs. Then the sound of boots. Major Thomas West approached, crisp in his dress uniform. He saluted. "Major," Parker said. "Do you know Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Knox?" The major turned, eyes scanning the man in the worn coat. Then he stepped forward. Slowly. And saluted. "Yes, Your Honor," he said quietly. "Every Marine knows that name." Gasps whispered through the gallery. A reporter lowered her pen. A veteran 2 rows back stood up, hand to heart. Parker nodded once. "To the court," she said, "this man is listed as transient, disruptive. But to my family, he is the reason my brother came home." She stood. "Mr. Knox," she said, her voice no longer judicial, "you are hereby recognized before this court, not as a vagrant, not as a defendant, but as Gunnery Sergeant Raymond E. Knox, United States Marine Corps." The courtroom held its breath. At the back, a door opened. A Marine officer entered, Navy Cross in hand. The room stood. As the medal was placed before him, Raymond Knox didn't speak. He just nodded once, the way soldiers do when words are too heavy. He had not worn a uniform in 15 years. Now, seated before the seal of the court and flanked by Marines in dress blues, Raymond Knox sat with his hands free, posture slowly unfolding, as if some invisible brace, long broken, had begun to knit itself back together. Judge Parker remained standing. Her voice remained level. But her hands gripped the edges of the bench like someone holding the line. "This court finds no merit in the charges brought against Gunnery Sergeant Knox," she said. "All citations are hereby dismissed." A murmur swept the room. But Parker wasn't done. "The record will be amended to reflect the court's formal recognition of his military service, and an immediate request will be sent to the Department of Veterans Affairs to reinstate all benefits with retroactive support." The prosecutor began to speak. She cut him off. "You will file no objection. If you have questions, see me in chambers." He sat. The Navy Cross, untouched, gleamed faintly on the table before Raymond. It caught the courtroom light in a way that made even the marble walls seem to pause. A young Marine, just out of Paris Island by the look of him, stepped forward with white gloves and reverence. He presented the medal. Knox did not reach for it. Instead, he looked at the judge. "I didn't save your brother to be thanked," he said, voice rough. "I did it because he was mine. That's all." Olivia Parker's jaw clenched. She gave a small nod. "I know." She stepped down from the bench, slowly. Deliberately. And then, in front of the stunned court, she saluted. It wasn't performative. It was precise. The kind given from officer to non-commissioned officer, from those who've borne weight together. The entire room stood in silence. A few civilians shifted uncertainly. But one by one, the veterans in attendance began to lift their hands. Silent salutes. No cheers. Just the sound of honor, rising like breath in cold air. Raymond's fingers brushed the medal at last. He didn't cry. He just straightened his shoulders. A little. Like a man remembering who he'd been before the world forgot. Aftermath. The courtroom emptied in waves. Some lingered. A reporter asked his name again, this time with reverence. He didn't answer. He was tired. A volunteer from the Veterans Legal Defense Network helped him to the hallway. The duffel bag was gone, taken by someone who thought he'd never return. Judge Parker intercepted him before the exit. She held out a folded document. "Temporary ID," she said. "And this," she handed him a business card, her personal cell written on the back. "Your record is no longer lost in the system." Raymond took it with a nod. He didn't ask where to go next. He had never planned that far ahead. Later. The veterans' home sat quietly at the edge of town, beneath a long row of pine trees that swayed even when there was no wind. Room 214 was plain. A single bed. A desk. A small cabinet. But on the wall, freshly mounted, hung a wooden frame, one navy cross, one bronze star, and 3 ribbons. Below them, a folded flag. A staff member found a photograph tucked in his file, a young Marine unit outside Ramadi, faces dusted with sand and laughter. Raymond in the back, unsmiling but present. They framed it. Hung it beside the medals. He never asked. He never needed to. Her visit. 1 week later, Olivia Parker arrived just after dusk. No bailiff, no fanfare. Just a canvas tote in her hand and her brother's old letters inside. She knocked. The door opened slowly. He didn't smile. But he stepped back to let her in. They sat at the small desk. She laid the letters out carefully. "Jacob wrote these about you," she said. He didn't touch them. Just stared. "Bravest man I ever knew," she read aloud. "Didn't talk much. Just acted when it mattered." Raymond blinked slowly. "I'm sorry it took this long," she whispered. He shook his head. "You didn't forget. That's enough." They sat in silence. The kind shared between soldiers and survivors. She came again on a Thursday. No cameras. No entourage. Just Olivia, the letters, and the sense that something long overdue was still unfolding. Raymond Knox met her at the door with quiet eyes and a folded newspaper tucked beneath his arm. He stepped aside, nodding once. This time, she brought coffee. They didn't speak at first. She laid the mug before him, black, no sugar, and he accepted it with the slow caution of someone unused to kindness that asked for nothing in return. After a while, Olivia reached into her coat pocket and withdrew another letter. This one was creased in the center, the ink faded where fingers had traced it too many times. "Jacob wrote this one a few days after Fallujah," she said. "You'd already gone stateside. He never knew where to send it." She slid it across the table. Raymond stared at the envelope for a long moment, then opened it with fingers that trembled slightly, not from age, but memory. Knox. I don't know if this will ever reach you. Maybe that's not the point. You pulled me out. I remember the sound, the fire, the rounds snapping overhead, the smell. I remember how you didn't say a word. You just hauled me out like it was nothing. I had a shattered femur. The doc said 2 more minutes and I would have bled out. You gave me those 2 minutes. I just wanted you to know. You saved my life. And more than that, you gave me the chance to come home. To write this. To still be a brother, a son, a man who gets to live. I hope life gave you something back. I hope you got peace. I owe you everything. J. Raymond folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just sat still, jaw set, as if the words had touched some place inside him too fragile to surface. Olivia watched him closely. She didn't press. She knew what grief looked like in men like him, quiet, armored, buried deep beneath silence and duty. 3 days later. It rained the day the VA paperwork came through. An envelope, thick with apology, arrived at room 214. Full reinstatement. Back pay. Medical support. Housing vouchers, even though he no longer needed them. There was a letter from a regional director. It read like a statement, not a recognition. A paragraph of regret. A line about oversight. He didn't read it twice. Instead, Raymond set it aside and opened the smaller envelope inside. Inside was a fresh VA card. Clean. Valid. His name printed in clear type, Knox, Raymond E. He stared at it for a long time. Then placed it beside the folded flag. Word spreads. It wasn't supposed to be news. But someone in the courtroom had recorded the moment the Marines saluted him. A short video, shaky but powerful, uploaded to a small veterans blog. From there, it spread. He didn't have a phone, didn't check email. But within days, letters began arriving at the home. Handwritten. Typed. Some from Marines who'd served under him. Some from strangers. A teacher in Iowa had her students write thank you notes. A retired colonel sent a copy of an old operations report with his name underlined. They were stacked in a drawer by his bed. He never answered them. But he read every one. Judge Parker's reform. In court, Olivia Parker moved with quiet precision. She requested a review of all misdemeanor cases involving veterans in the last 5 years. She created a diversion docket, alternative sentencing for veterans facing housing or healthcare crises. Some called it soft justice. She called it keeping promises. When asked why she did it, she only said, because I saw what forgetting looks like. And I won't let it happen again. In room 214. The medals were cleaned. Polished gently by a volunteer who never asked questions. The flag was repositioned so it caught the late afternoon light. Raymond began to walk the gardens again. Not far. Just enough. The staff offered to move him to a larger room, but he refused. This one's good, he said. It had a window. It had the flag. It had the letters. And it had space enough for silence. The spring came late that year. Snow clung to the edges of sidewalks like the memory of something that no longer belonged. In the veterans' home garden, daffodils broke the soil slowly, like they were uncertain if the world had changed enough to welcome them. Raymond Knox stood near the stone path, coat buttoned, hands behind his back. He watched the light sift through the bare branches overhead. There was a bench he favored now. From it, he could see the flagpole and the small plaque beneath it, names carved into bronze, one of them his. Staff Sergeant Gilmore, the groundskeeper, sat beside him sometimes. Never said much. Sometimes just whittled a piece of pine or brought an extra cup of coffee. You ever think about going back? Gilmore asked once. Raymond didn't look at him. Back where? Downtown. The bakery. That place. Raymond exhaled through his nose. Not sure it would know me. One morning. The van was waiting by the front curb. The driver, a young vet from logistics, held the door open without a word. Raymond stepped in slowly, wearing the same coat, but now over clean clothes and a pressed shirt. On his lapel, the tiny Marine Corps insignia gleamed once more. They didn't head to the courthouse. They drove to 6th and Franklin. The bakery. The one with the side vent where he used to sit with his knees pulled tight to his chest, hoping for warmth and invisibility. Now, it was different. The bakery had painted the wall, added a mural. A marine silhouette in deep blue. Beneath it, a plaque. In honor of those we failed to see. Raymond stepped out of the van and walked up to it. People paused. Some recognized his face from the news story. A few stepped aside respectfully. No one spoke. A child, maybe 7, pointed. That's him, right? His mother hushed him, but Raymond turned and gave the boy a small nod. The kind you make when there's nothing to say, but you want someone to remember anyway. At the courthouse. The same hallway. The same floor. He walked slowly this time, shoulders higher. Judge Parker waited near the entrance, no robe, just a navy coat and the firmness of someone who had stopped letting policy outrank principle. This docket's changed, she told him quietly. He nodded. There were 2 veterans in the courtroom that morning. One faced a trespass charge. The other had stolen aspirin from a drugstore. Raymond sat in the back. When the judge looked up from the bench and saw him there, she didn't smile. She only said, "Let's begin." That evening. A quiet knock on room 214's door. The nurse opened it cautiously. A girl, no more than 12, stepped in holding a drawing, a man in uniform standing beneath a tree, with a folded flag in his hands. "It's for you," she said. "My dad said you're why he made it home." Raymond looked at the drawing for a long time. The lines were shaky. The flag too big. But it was perfect. He didn't say thank you. He just placed it beside the letters, where only sunlight and memory could touch it. That night. He sat by the window. Outside, the flag moved gently in the wind. The light from the corridor cast a thin bar across his floor. He stared at the folded letters on the desk. Jacob's writing. Olivia's notes. The envelope that once held nothing but silence, now full. Raymond Knox no longer wondered if anyone remembered his name. The question had changed. Now he asked, how do we remember others? He picked up a pen. Beneath Jacob's last letter, he began to write. The letter took 2 days to write. Not because of its length, Raymond kept it brief, but because each word carried the weight of years. There was no poetry in it. Just a plainness earned through fire. He folded the paper slowly. Slipped it into a stamped envelope marked for a local nonprofit, the one Judge Parker had started for veterans in legal crisis. It would be read aloud at a fundraiser, though he didn't ask for that. He only wrote it because someone needed to remember. No one ever saved me for applause, the letter said. I did what we all did. We went where we were told, stayed when we should have run, left things behind we never recovered. But the hardest part wasn't war. It was coming home and finding no one there to catch you. I don't need pity. I never did. But if one man can be seen, fully, rightly, then maybe others will be, too. That's all I ask. Sunday afternoon. The room was quiet. A soft rain tapped the window. The folded flag seemed brighter in the gray light. Gilmore knocked once and entered. Mail, he said, placing a small stack on the desk. Most of it was cards. One letter came from a former lieutenant. Another from a medic who remembered Ramadi. One envelope, unmarked, held only a photograph. It was taken in 2004, grainy and smoke-streaked. A younger Raymond stood in the foreground, helmet off, sweat across his brow. Behind him, fire and sky. On the back, a line in pen, "I lived. J." Raymond held the photo in both hands for a long time. He placed it beside the child's drawing on the desk. Then he sat back. He didn't smile. But something eased in his eyes. The ceremony. Judge Parker hadn't planned it to be public. But word spread, as it always did when dignity quietly rises. They held it in the old courthouse rotunda. Not for spectacle. But because that's where it had started, where the silence around him had been broken. There was no ribbon, no parade. Just a lectern, a framed proclamation, and a new plaque on the wall. Gunnery Sergeant Raymond E. Knox. In recognition of duty rendered, dignity restored, and a nation's vow remembered. Raymond stood off to the side. Not at the podium. He refused. But when Parker spoke, she turned toward him at the end. "We are judged not only by the laws we write," she said, "but by the men we forget. Let this place remember." Veterans in the gallery stood. One by one. Then civilians. Then courthouse staff. He lowered his gaze. The applause was brief. It wasn't needed. Weeks later. Room 214 had a new addition. A bookshelf, simple, pinewood. Filled slowly with folded letters, small gifts. Things people sent not for honor, but because something in them had shifted. A teacher in Nebraska wrote. "My class asked what courage looked like. I showed them your story." A father in Kentucky wrote. "I never told my kids I served. After hearing about you, I did." They came from everywhere. He didn't reply. But he read every line. The last visit. Olivia came one morning, unannounced. She brought no papers, no letters. Only a thermos of coffee and a photograph, her brother in uniform, smiling faintly, years younger than the grief that followed him home. She placed it beside the frame of Raymond in Ramadi. "I think he'd want you to have it," she said. Raymond didn't argue. He just nodded once. They sat in silence. Two people who had carried too much, finally sitting in a room full of memory and light. Never forgotten.